History 1. I've been a trucker for different companies over the past decade. 4 years ago, I was working for a logistics company in Oklahoma, handling shipments. I usually drove the semi, which is what I was behind the wheel of on January 15th. It was a chilly Monday, the start of a busy week, and a lot of loads needed to be shipped. I was determined to get everything done quickly, so I started driving at 3 p.m., aiming to reach my destination that same night. I didn't want to pull off on the side of the road to sleep. I was driving about 5 miles over the speed limit after midnight, which is quite fast for a semi. I began to feel very tired, but the destination was less than an hour away and I figured I could make it. My eyes were getting dry and it was becoming a chore just to keep them open. I splashed some water on my hand and rubbed it on my face. It helped a little, waking me up slightly. My truck was the only vehicle on the road at this hour, so besides my headlights, the road was completely dark. I remember reaching to take a sip of my water and almost spitting it out when I saw a figure approaching fast in the distance. I hit the brakes hard, and as the truck slowed down to a near stop, I could better distinguish the features of this person almost standing in the middle of the road. He seemed to be wearing all black with some kind of dark scarf wrapped around his neck. He had an unnaturally long neck, which was almost freaky looking. His face, however, was a complete blur. I couldn't make out any features. As my truck slowed down and got closer to this mysterious man, I was about to roll down the window to ask if he needed a ride, but he just turned to his left and darted into the woods. I didn't take an extra second to stop and think about it. I just pressed on the gas pedal again and moved on. Regardless of how freaky it was, I was in a rush. In fact, it wasn't even until about 20 seconds later that my heart really started racing from the shock and how strange it really was. Maybe 5 minutes later, I was able to get over it, but just like that, something else happened. As I was back to my cruising speed, I saw something run across the street in front of me. At first it looked like a big animal, but as I got closer and it crossed into the woods, I realized it looked like another person. I didn't even tap on the brakes this time. I just kept going and even stepped on the gas a little more because I was starting to get freaked out and wanted to get there faster. Another few minutes went by with nothing happening. However, I was getting increasingly tired, and at times I was even swerving into the other lane a little bit. With about 40 minutes left in the drive, I didn't know if I could make it anymore. I started looking around for good places to pull over and park for the night. There was eventually a little opening on the side of the road made of gravel. I guess it was meant to be just a little parking rest stop kind of thing. I pulled the semi into it, parked it, and leaned back to rest my eyes. I fell asleep for not even an hour, just to wake up out of nowhere to the darkness. I still don't know what woke me up, but as I looked outside through the windshield, something in my gut was telling me to turn on the headlights. So I flicked the knob, and the lights lit up the surrounding area in front of my truck. There was something in front of the truck, though. A man. The same man with the dark scarf I'd seen earlier standing on the side of the road. Now I could see his face much clearer. He had a very wide smile, his eyes were open as wide as possible, and he looked right at me through the windshield. I turned the truck on and pulled it out of that little clearing as quickly as possible. I didn't know what to think. How could he have walked so many miles from where I had seen him last? I didn't stop again that night until I made it to my destination. From there, I fell asleep in the parking lot and woke up early the next morning. The only logical explanation I could think of is that my mind was playing tricks on me because I had been seeing strange things all night. I've never heard of a hallucination being so vivid and terrifying, though, and that's the part that still really confuses and scares me. History 2. Before getting an office job in the city, I worked as a FedEx driver for 2 years. The pay was good, and I mostly enjoyed it, though it had its moments. This was back in 2012, 2 years after I finished college. I was working the 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. shift on a cold Thursday evening in the dead of winter, which meant it got dark around 5 p.m. I was living in a small town in Georgia, not exactly a glamorous place. It wasn't exactly ghetto, but it wasn't a nice area either. My deliveries were often in the same town. The housing setup in this town was peculiar. Some blocks had rows of houses and trailer homes spaced far apart, while others were completely desolate. This made for fewer deliveries overall because the houses were so spread out. It took longer to make deliveries compared to a regular suburban or urban community. Deliveries were always marked on the map so I could take a more strategic route instead of just driving all over the place. After hours and hours of deliveries across at least 3 different small towns, I started heading down one of those streets I'd mentioned, with spaced-out trailer homes and small houses on one side and forests on the other. It was a little past 6 p.m., and my shift was winding down with only a few deliveries left. There was one house on this block and the package needed a signature, meaning I couldn't just leave it on the stoop. I pulled up in front of the house, went to the back of the truck, and hauled out one of the biggest and heaviest boxes of the day. There were some small metal pieces bumping around inside. I couldn't even guess what could be in there. My job was just to lug the thing to the front door of the trailer home, and that's exactly what I did. There was no doorbell, so I had to knock. There were no lights on inside, and I didn't see a car out front, so I hoped someone was home. I knocked a few more times, then saw the curtains move and heard footsteps approaching the door. After a long, suspicious pause, the door finally cracked open, and an older woman poked her head out. When I told her she had a package to sign for, she opened the door fully. She seemed nervous and fidgety as she signed the device with a sloppy signature. She then asked me to help her carry the box into her room. I had a feeling that would be the case. The moment I stepped into the trailer home, I got a huge whiff of some awful stench. You know how every home has a distinct smell, whether good or bad? Well, this home smelled terrible. I don't know what it was. She led me to a back section behind the tiny living room space, then down a narrow hallway where I struggled to carry the box. She brought me to a door and told me to maneuver the box into the closet in the back of the room. I asked her to flick on the light, but she said the light didn't work. It was nearly pitch black in there, the only source of light being the lamp from the living room seeping down the hall into this room. I could see just enough to navigate the box inside. As I got closer to the closet, I saw someone standing in the corner of the closet. I knew for certain it was a person because of the shape of the outline and the slight movement. There was no logical explanation for this. This person was clearly hiding from me, waiting. I left the box where it was and walked past the woman saying, "Have a nice day." She started screaming at me to come back and help her, and even called me a piece of crap. I didn't know what this woman and whoever was in that closet were planning to do, and I didn't want to stick around to find out. I continued with my shift and went home that night, starting my job hunt for a new, better job. History 3. I have been a truck driver since I was 26, and I've done a lot of night drives and, of course, had my fair share of odd experiences. I did deliveries for a number of different companies. Often, I'd have to drive across state lines to make shipments to receiving companies or stores. One day, I had to drive literally from one side of Arizona to the other to deliver a trailer full of wooden furniture. Much of the drive was through open desert roads. It was going to be many hours, and I already had a late start to the day, so I knew a majority of my drive would be in the dark. Given the nature of these desert roads at night, how straight they are and how little traffic there is, it meant I could push the truck a little faster than I would on other roads. This meant that when I saw the flashing rear lights of a car on the horizon, I had to hit the brakes a little extra hard to bring the truck to a stop. When I finally pulled up behind the car, it was an old Chevy Impala parked on the side of the road in the desert dirt, with its hazards on. I got out of my truck because, of course, I had to be a good Samaritan and check if they needed help. I walked over to the car and tapped on the window, only to get no response. I bent down a little to look into the car through the tinted window. There didn't seem to be anyone sitting inside. I did the same thing for all 3 other seats and could confirm there wasn't anyone in the car. So I looked out into the cool, dark desert that the road ran through, though I couldn't see any further than maybe 20 yards in front of me. I was feeling especially helpful this night for some reason, so I went back to my truck and got a flashlight from the toolbox that sat underneath the passenger seat. It was a heavy-duty tactical flashlight that was so bright it would hurt your eyes to look directly at it. As soon as I turned it on, it revealed what appeared to be an abandoned gas station on the side of the road. Apparently, I hadn't noticed it before. I guess the reason I didn't realize it before was because the whole fill-up or parking area was basically dirt. There wasn't any concrete. There were also only 2 gas pumps. Behind them was a small building, probably an old quick-stop store at one point. It made the most sense that whoever's car was over there would be in that building. I went to the front door, which was permanently jammed open, and the flashlight lit up a decent portion of the room inside. It was what I thought, a big convenience store you'd find at many gas stations, or at least it used to be. It was no wonder it didn't last on a road like this, though. I called out to let anybody know of my presence and that I was there to help. There was the slightest bit of echo in the room, which gave me chills for some reason. Then I heard something, probably a shoe scraping against the floor on the opposite side of the room, behind a few shelves that were probably once filled with snack items and drinks. I called out once again, offering my help if it was needed. Then I heard a deep, heavy whisper saying, "Get out." I understood what was said immediately, but I didn't understand why whoever said it would say that. I was also hearing heavy breathing in one corner of the room. It was enough to make me get the hell out of there in a hurry. On my walk back to my truck, this is what I heard, and there had to be at least 5 seconds of confusion. I didn't know if what I was hearing was real or not, if that even makes sense. I ran to my truck and called 911 because, to be honest, I was too scared to go back into that building. They asked for an exact location and I couldn't tell them. All I could say was that I was by an abandoned gas station on some road in the desert. They asked me to stay on the line so I could describe my location better. But suddenly the car in front of me turned on and started speeding down the desert road. I didn't even notice him get into his car. It was so dark, and I was so distracted by the phone call. I ran back into the building to see if anybody was still in there, while of course keeping 911 on the line. I went to the back section where I'd heard the voice and breathing, and I was mortified to see a fresh pool of blood on the floor. I could only imagine what had happened. I explained into the phone that I believed I had just stumbled into a crime scene. Eventually, they were able to send a bunch of state troopers to the scene. They asked me for any information I could give: license plate number, what the suspect looked like, what I thought happened. All I said was it was a black Chevy Impala, early 2000s, and I heard a man tell me to get out before hearing a woman scream as they left the building. There was no body left behind, but I had a few ideas of what might have happened. I'm sure the state police took some blood samples and whatnot, but I wasn't able to be of much more assistance. Shamefully, I did not have a dash cam at that point to get the license plate number, but literally the next week I installed a dash cam into my assigned truck. This was just one of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences that will always haunt me.